Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is, I'm Kat Eastman. I'm with the Sea Turtle Hospital at University of Florida Whitney Laboratory. And I want to introduce pretty much what the Whitney Laboratory is before we talk about the Sea Turtle Hospital and before you guys actually get to meet our patients. So about 46 years ago, the Whitney Laboratory was started. And the interesting thing about the Whitney Lab is that it's a research institute of University of Florida. And what that means is we have right now 10 faculty laboratories within our lab. And each one of those scientists do science 100% of the time. So they don't have a teaching responsibility. It's purely research. Now, that being said, they also have graduate students and postdocs, so they're training future scientists kind of as part of their research. And Whitney Laboratory is a marine lab, so that means that we have salt water, ocean water, because we're right across the street from the Atlantic Ocean, running through our laboratory, and it's the one thing that really unites all of our different labs and specialties is that we all use some sort of marine organism as our model organism for asking those big research questions. So I will tell you that it can be a really exciting place to be because science is really exciting and discoveries are made all the time, but it can also be a pressure cooker of sorts as graduate students come in and are new to the program and learn new things or have to defend their thesis or dissertation. So emotions run up and down here, as does the creativity with science. And it's exciting for me to be part of the Sea Turtle Hospital, which has not been here for all 46 years of the Whitney Lab's history. But the reason we have a Sea Turtle Hospital is about 7 years ago, we started on this build a Sea Turtle Hospital journey. And it was because a group of us in conservation, in the wild, if you will, saw, and we worked with sea turtles, saw that these sea turtles, these green sea turtles in our waterways were suffering from a disease that we didn't traditionally see in my part of the state. So we're in St. Augustine, which is kind of the northeastern part of Florida, for those of you that are not local to my side. So traditionally, sea turtles with this particular disease, which I'll tell you about, were found down in the Keys, in the Florida Keys, and in the Indian River Lagoon. And so a group of us were starting to see turtles with these tumors. And that was strange because I had known about Fibropapillomatosis, the disease that affects primarily green sea turtles as juveniles. I had seen that in South Florida when I was in college. And to see it in my backyard was really shocking and kind of pushed us into why is this happening here? What can we do about it? And sort of just as I was an educator at that time, and my constant desire to learn more just had me looking into what could we do, and these are sick animals, where can they go? Who can fix them? Who can treat them? What even is this disease? And so what we found was the closest hospital, Sea Turtle Hospital, because they exist around the state of Florida, the closest hospital that could help combat this disease was 4 to 6 hours away from us. So it kind of was a perfect storm in that we needed to come together and create a hospital in our part of the state, especially if this disease was here to stay. So it makes you ask all kinds of questions like, how do diseases migrate or move? Who can get these diseases? So those are big questions that I'll mention a little bit later. So we embarked on creating a sea turtle hospital, and where else do you want to do that but a place that has an excellent source of ocean water, because water quality is super important for rehabbing sea turtles. And also to figure out what's going on with this disease, how can we help? We figured that, well, scientists are going to be a critical part of solving this mystery. So we approached the University of Florida and the Whitney Laboratory with some money and said, hey, can we do this? Is it something that you guys think we can do? And like I said, it was a perfect storm. And here we are 7 years later. We are about to celebrate our 5th year being open as a hospital. So my one thing I want to say is it is like, really teamwork makes the dream work, which I know Stephanie said earlier. It really does. It's never one person causing all these great things to happen. It really is a group of people coming together. So what is fibropapillomatosis? So we're right now in our treatment room, in our hospital room. It's our surgical suite when we need to do surgery. It's sort of like being at your dog or cat's veterinary hospital behind the scenes. So we don't see clients here. Our clients are our patients, are the sea turtles. And the way that works is people from the public, maybe fishermen out in the waterways, find an injured or sick turtle. They call Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, which starts the process of how you get a turtle to us, a sick turtle. So we see many patients. We're already on number 53 for the year for 2020, but we don't admit all of them to our hospital. So we do act kind of like an emergency room for triage. We'll provide veterinary care for sea turtles that we don't necessarily admit to our rehab and education and research program. So the only turtles that do stay are the turtles, the green turtles that suffer from the fibropapillomatosis, or this tumor disease, which Devin is going to show you in a little while, but all of our turtles are about the size of this guy. Let's see, this guy still doesn't have a name, but let's just say his name is Bruno. Actually, you guys will meet Bruno out there. But all of our turtles are about this size when they come to us. So fibropapillomatosis is a tumor disease that for a long time has thought to have been caused by a herpes virus. Now, in science, things change. As we get new technologies, as we come up with new questions to ask or new ideas come about, we can kind of tackle those. Well, what we once believed was caused by a herpes virus, we said, well, this has been 30 years or more that we've been saying this. Maybe it's 50 years, maybe it's 60 years that scientists have been saying there's a herpes virus. But it's not, what we've found is it's not the only part of the story. So by asking some really deep questions and sequencing tumor tissue, removing tumors that we would typically throw in the bin, we're able to give those on to the scientists, the research scientists that can, and students that can sequence the DNA and the RNA and look for virus, living virus or latent virus DNA. And we've been able to come up with some really interesting, not quite answers, because we don't have a cure. So we're on the path to hopefully ameliorating some of the impacts to the sea turtles. But one thing we found is that at the molecular level, this disease looks very, and I say looks, very similar to human skin cancer, to basal cell carcinoma, which we know in humans is brought on by UV rays. So we've been able to kind of shift some of our research questions to look at how do UV rays impact sea turtles or impact this disease, and does every turtle get this disease? How do they spread this disease? Those are all questions that we don't have, and the body of science doesn't necessarily have the answer to. So we do our best to quarantine patients from one another, separate tools that we use or toys that we use in their tanks, so that we're not encouraging the spread, but really the etiology is unknown, how it can transfer from one animal to another. So it's a kind of a complex disease problem that we continue to chip away at, which is exciting and challenging, because at the same token, or the same time, this is an endangered species, not this is a stuffy, but the endangered species, the green turtle, our whole end goal is to release them back to the wild. So we want to make sure that we can give them a really good fighting chance. It's not to find it a home in an aquarium. It's really, our goal is to rehab them and release them back to the wild. And while we have them in our care, learn as much as we can from them. So when we remove these tumors, when our veterinarian surgically removes these tumors, we can save them and bank them in the freezer. When we draw blood for routine health exams every week, we can test the blood that we need, and we can save the remaining blood for future research questions. So it's trying to take advantage of all the waste that we can get from these sick animals during their treatment process, and so that, you know, we're hopefully helping the green turtles as a species as a whole. So one of the things that we did find, I mentioned that the tumors are similar to molecular level to basal cell carcinoma. Well, there's a human cancer drug that's been around for a very long time, that's typically been used topically, that we've been able to get compounded by a special pharmacy that can put it in a sterile eye drop. So these tumors will grow on the soft tissue anywhere on the turtle, which a lot of times that's not necessarily the hard shell, the plastron, or the carapace, but around the neck and the arms and flipper kind of soft areas, but also around the eyes. So we found that by using these topical eye drops for 8 weeks after tumors have been surgically removed from eyelids, we were able to get the tumor regrowth down to only about 15% of the time regrowth. So that was something huge, with just a little bit of research, and research always takes money and sequencing, but we were able to kind of map the pathways of how these tumors are growing. So it's exciting, and it gets real deep into science really quickly, but on the superficial level, we're helping turtles, and we love talking about them and having opportunities like this to teach folks and welcome you in. Typically, we have a group of people in our treatment room as we do a tour, and so it's exciting to be able to reach others this way. Let's see, other things. I don't want to tip over and send you guys out to see Devin in case there's something else in here I missed. As knowing that you all are teachers, and it is very important to know that our day-to-day operation and care for turtles, for sea turtles, it does require an awful lot of measuring and weighing and math. So we often have kids ask, you know, how do you get to be a sea turtle veterinarian or a sea turtle veterinary technician? And we say science and math is extremely important, because we're measuring turtles to see how they're growing. We're using calipers that are in metric. We're feeding them based on what their weight is. So we're always calculating, you know, kilograms and milligrams. You know, we're doing so many calculations on a daily basis. Our drugs, our pharmacy, everything is based on the turtle's weight, in addition to its level of health. That's another interesting thing. We do use medications that everything's approved by the FDA. So many of our medications are things that maybe you as a human would take, but certainly things that your dog or cat in the veterinary world that are used. things don't necessarily work the same way because sea turtles are reptiles, so they're air-breathing animals that spend all of their time in the water. So when we take them out to do some sort of a treatment or cleaning of wounds or surgical sites, we have to use things that are really thick and viscous. Think about Vaseline, because if we're going to put medication on top of a turtle, we want it to stay there. So all of these sort of, how can we improve on certain medications and drugs that are used in the veterinary world? How can we translate that to a more aquatic world? So we're always looking for things that we know that would work in one aspect, and how can we apply it to the water environment. So we keep it very fluid here, maybe a pun intended. But for one thing I want to mention is we use honey topically, and not the little honey you can buy at Kroger or Publix, but we can use honey straight from a beekeeper, which is a nice thick liquid. We can feed it to them, or we can topically apply it to like a boat strike injury or something. We also have medical grade honey, which is like a thick paste. And honey is one of those, you can look this up, but it's one of those things that has been used in wound treatment for a very, very long time. It has antimicrobial properties, and we find it's very helpful with sea turtle rehabilitation. It's used often in burns in humans or diabetic wounds. So that's there's your little snippet of the good things about honey and how we can connect bees to sea turtles in one step. So I think with that, I'm gonna kick it over to Devin, who's out at the sea turtle tanks. And she's going to introduce you to the patients that we have in our care right now.
Yeah, before we transition over to Devin,
Sure.
We have one question. Victoria asks,
sure. What
is medical grade honey and how is it different from regular honey?
Okay, so it is processed. For one, it's not free. It does contain 80% of the active leptospermum honey, which is the part of the honey that has the really good antimicrobial parts. Meta Honey is a brand that you can buy on Amazon. I'm not telling you that you can use it on your own injuries, but I recommend if you wanted to know a little bit more about medical grade honey. It's not necessarily pasteurized, but it's sterilized in a certain way that it's safe for topical use, but is still preserving the natural remedy that using raw honey is, I think, if that makes any sense. Does that answer your question, Victoria?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Amazon, I come.
Amazon, I come. Does anyone else have any questions before you leave the treatment room? I guess now's a good time to do that. Sorry, Brian.
That's okay. I don't think so just yet. Let's transition over to Devin, and then we can stick around, and if they have questions, we can ask at the end of our tour.
Okay, sounds great.
All righty. Hello, everybody. Hello. I'm Devin, and I am have been with Kat actually since we first opened. So like Kat mentioned, it's really great that we're able to do this virtually because we did miss out on some tours. But to bring it around, we have our deck space. If I can flip this. All right. So this is our deck space, which is where our animals are kept. Like Kat mentioned, we are permitted through Florida Fish and Wildlife. So we're actually permitted. We have 4 rehabilitation tanks, and we are actually able to divide those tanks based on our patient load and what we have going on. So we can actually have anywhere between 1 to 8 animals at any given time. Again, we're dealing with this disease, so we want to make sure that our water quality is in tip-top shape, but then also we want to make sure that animals that are grouped together in these rehab tanks are kind of at the similar stage of rehab, whether they had just come in, whether their tumor scores are a little bit dissimilar, or where they were located when they came to us. We get animals from all over the state of Florida. There's 17 different sea turtle hospitals in the state of Florida, and there's actually only 6 of us that primarily deal with FP, fibropapillomatosis. Other facilities are much larger and can house FP animals and non-FP animals. We're the only facility that, like Kat mentioned, just deals with these animals with this disease. So bringing it back to Whitney, awesome location. We get our salt water right from the main source. So we have our 4 rehab tanks, and we'll get onto the deck and I'll show you our protein skimmers, because water quality is a huge part of the rehab. We want to make sure that these animals have the best water quality that we can possibly have. We have open systems, which means we get our water right from the ocean, and we have the ability to close or open our tanks so that the water will just continually circulate or just run as an open system, which is great for dealing with animals that are in post-surgery or new patients to us. So I'm going to take you on a little journey, kind of what our animals go through when they're with us. This is actually Bruno. Bruno is our newest patient. He's been with us for about 2 weeks now. We actually don't know the sex of these animals right now. So we kind of, I'm the worst one of it by calling them male or female. But this is Bruno. Bruno's been with us for 2 weeks. So you can really get a good visual of those tumors and how they really affect this animal. He came in extremely emaciated and buoyant. And as you can tell, we don't know their full story. We kind of guess when they first come to us, obviously buoyancy issues or some type of gas or any type of plastic impaction that can cause that. But you could see along his carapace, which is the top part of that shell, that there are some deform. So that is probably from an old vessel strike that has healed. The amazing thing about these animals is they're pretty resilient with what they're capable of going through on their own. So usually when they come to us, they're pretty weak, pretty debilitated. So you can get a really good visual of these tumors on this guy. When they first come into us, we get full x-rays on site, and then we actually will transport them out to a human imaging place, and these animals get full CT scans. So like Kat had mentioned, the goal for all of our patients is to remove these tumors, get their body condition, blood work within normal limits, and then release them. Right now, we are able to remove all of these external tumors, and we have quite a big success with releasing animals. Unfortunately, we have noticed that sometimes that these tumors will start to develop internally. And unfortunately, at this stage, there's nothing we can do for that. But it's still a success story in our eyes because of the research. So if an animal needs to be humanely euthanized or just passes on their own when they're in our care, we do necropsies on every single patient. So along with those tissue samples externally and those blood samples that we're able to get, when we do those necropsies, we actually are getting valuable information from those internal organs. But it's not all sad. Being able to release them is really awesome. Again, that's Bruno. Bruno actually just went in for CT last week, and our veterinarian will be looking over those images, and then we'll actually move forward and we'll actually be able to endoscope them using a rigid scope and get a better visual of those internal organs as well, and be able to collect biopsy samples if there's anything internal that we see that's a little bit not happy. So that's Bruno. And then throughout the phases of rehab, this is Delta. Delta is actually the longest patient that we've had right now. Delta came to us in September, and Delta is actually quote unquote tumor free at this point. So she's in the final phases of rehab. We do know that this animal is a female due to our veterinarian being able to scope her. We're able to see those internal organs and see that she was a female. So Delta has had, these animals obviously are reptiles, cold-blooded. They metabolize everything very slow. So when we do surgery, we can use full anesthesia or we can use locals, but basically we can only have them under anesthesia for about 1 hour because the reversal and the waking up process takes a little bit longer. So Delta came to us in September, and she's actually had 5 surgeries since she's been with us. So unlike you think of us or your dog or your cat, You kind of go to your doctor or your vet, and they're going to get rid of everything at once, and then do some rehab, physical therapy, whatnot, hopefully get a little follow-up, good to go, everything's great. Unfortunately, these guys have to have multiple surgeries, so we kind of start quadrantly. So we'll start with eye tumors usually first, because we've noticed that while they're with us, they're getting tip-top water quality, they're on a regimented diet, we're giving them antibiotics, and then as they become healthy and happy, unfortunately, those tumors become healthy and happy, so that those tumors will actually start to grow fairly quickly. So we want to get rid of the eye tumors. Obviously, those are the ones that are affecting vision and eating. So we'll start with those, and then we'll kind of go quadrant and start with like a right front flipper, left front flipper, and it's usually between a month or two before an animal is ready to go for surgery again. So Delta is actually tumor-free. She's in her final phases of rehab. Usually it's about a month or two, depending on the individual, until those surgery sites are nice and healed, their blood work is nice and normal, and then we'll get her ready for release. What we do for that is, of course, we'll take a nice big blood panel, and then our veterinarian will clear that blood work is within normal ranges, and then we'll contact Florida Fish and Wildlife. All of our animals will get tagged, and then we'll actually get able to release them. And Florida Fish and Wildlife are the ones that are pretty much in charge of releasing as far as where that animal goes and when. And then over here we have, again, this is a divided tank, and we have Eugenie. And Eugenie is also in the final phases of rehab. She just had her final tumor removal surgery about 2 weeks ago, and she's still healing. This is actually an animal that we did use that fluorouracil that Kat was mentioning. So she did an 8-week course of those eye drops, and she just finished those about 2 weeks ago. So she does have a spot on her carapace that she might show us that's still healing. Nope, she doesn't want to show it. And then this is Archie. Archie is actually our smallest patient right now. He's about 2.6 kilograms. So we kind of don't know the age of these animals either. We kind of base that off of the size of them. So their carapace size, like Kat had mentioned, we say they're about dinner plate size, and they could be anywhere between the ages of 3 to 8, depending. They grow on their resources. So when they're out in the ocean, kind of depending on where they're at and how much they're eating and how healthy they are will depend on how much they grow. So we kind of guesstimate that Archie is probably about 3 years old. We have these enrichments for our patients too, like I mentioned, the FP surgery, so they're with us for a longer period of time. So obviously when you're in this little tank, we do give them different enrichments. So Archie has this hide that we've made, green turtles. I jokingly like to say they're the divas of the sea. They like to be clean. They don't necessarily have a lot of epibiota like a couple of the other species. So we give them different enrichments so that they can scratch their carapace on, and of course just hide in them. And then this is also a green feeder. So we know that these animals at this stage in life are omnivores. So we actually feed them a protein diet of a variety of seafood. They get herring, shrimp, mackerel, and squid. And then they also get their green feeder. It takes a village. We get our produce delivered to us once a week from the St. Augustine Alligator Farm. And we actually feed them, I call it the salad bar in land lettuce. We feed them green leaf, red leaf, and romaine lettuce, and then green pepper and green cucumber. And the minerals that are in that have been found through research that are very similar to those natural sea grasses and sea lettuce that these animals are eating out in the wild. And because we're at such an amazing location, we were able to plumb in a separate tank, and we're actually growing natural sea grasses and sea lettuce for these animals, which is primarily what they're going to eat when they first come into us. And then usually after a couple of days or weeks sometimes, hi Adam, these animals do start to realize that we're pretty cool and then pick up really quickly on their seafood and their greens. So this is our salad bar that have all those produce that I just mentioned. And this is really great because it's also an enrichment for them. So this is going to sink down to the bottom of the tank, and then they're going to eat off of the bottom like they would naturally do out in the wild. So this is Richard. Richard is actually one of our larger patients. We do know that she is a female. She came into us back in April, and she's already had 1 tumor removal surgery in her inguinal region, which she might show you if I can get her underwater. Working with the researchers, we have come up with a naming theme. So last year, our theme was, since it was our 4th year open, we went with a theme of 4. So all of our patients have a 4th themed name, like you met Delta, the 4th letter in the Greek alphabet. So this year being our 5th year open, we have named all of our patients in honor of marine scientists or oceanographers. So this is Richard Dawkins. And I don't think she's gonna wanna show us her incision sites. But this is, or she's not gonna wanna eat her greens for us either. Oh, maybe. So Richard is 13.6 kilograms. She is the 2nd largest patient that we've actually had in our care. The largest was an animal named Banana that was found on the Banana River. Oh, you can see those incision sites and those tumors. Like I said, we'll go quadrant. So we'll start with a large cluster in the right inguinal and then move over to the left within a month or 2. Each patient is definitely different, even though they're aquatic reptiles. But as far as what their stress levels are and how they respond to any type of surgery and treatment. So like I said, we get these animals from all over the state. All of our animals have their little tank tags. So Richard is actually from Daytona. And usually the fibropapillomatosis is the secondary issue. Their primary issues are usually because they're either buoyant, caught on a hook and line, hit by a boat, and then we obviously notice that they have these tumors. And Bruno, again, you can get a good visual of Bruno's tumors. And then I don't know how we're doing on time.
So we are probably just about ready to jump into our question and answer session, if that works for you, Devin.
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and pop back into the room over here so I can hear you guys pretty well.
All right, and we are about 12:12, so if anybody needs to top out, grab some lunch or anything like that, you're more than welcome to do so. I know we have a ton of turtle questions, so I'm excited to jump into those questions. Our first question, let's jump into them. Our first question is going to come from Vicky, and she asks, are there any red tide issues there to prevent an open system water input?
Deb, do you want me to take it or you got it?
Yeah, sure. You go ahead, Kat.
Okay. Our part of the state is, and our source of ocean water comes directly from the Atlantic. A lot of red tide, so no, first off, no. We have had one red tide event, I think in 2008 was, 2007, 2008 was the last time we had a red tide situation. A lot of times in those enclosed body of water, like the Indian River Lagoon, there'll be a lot of algal situations that happen in the warm water. We have a ton of flow through our inlets, so no, luckily. But we do know, and we do work with and cooperate with other hospitals around the state, and I know there's some big push on research to different treatments to help relieve the initial impacts of the red tide on sea turtles. So I hear things coming down the pike to help turtles get through those sort of impacts. Good question.
Okay, our next question is from Jonathan, and he asks, is there any tracking of released patients to follow up and make sure they are thriving?
You want to take that, Deb?
So all of our patients do get tagged. They get flipper tags on their front flippers based on the size, but everybody gets a pit tag that's like a microchip that you would have for your dog or your cat. All of that information does go into a database. It's it's the ocean, so it's a little tricky to be able to really monitor and see exactly what's going on. The only way for us to know is if our animals are to restrand. So if they were to be caught in a hook and line or in a cast net per se, and then they notice that those animals are tagged. Since we've opened, we've had 3 recaptures. Unfortunately, just being at the wrong, or actually fortunately being at the wrong place at the wrong time. We had an animal, Pons, who underwent rehab with us. He was only with us for about 3 months, and he was released, and then within a week was caught on a hook and line. And we got the phone call and were able to figure out who the animal was and how they were. And then, of course, they send us a series of photos. And then we had another animal, Tamatoa, that after about 3 months of being released was again recaptured in a cast net. And the good thing about those animals is that they've come back and were quickly released right away, but there was no new growth or there was no regrowth on those animals. So that's wonderful. We did have one animal that unfortunately washed in deceased already after only a few months of being released. And unfortunately that animal did have some active regrowth tumor. Once we got it and did the necropsy, we actually also found out that there was internal tumors in that particular animal as well. So it's really, really difficult to tell. We did have another animal that actually went through rehab at a different facility, Gumbo Limbo down south, and restranded. And she had been released in October, and she restranded in July, I believe, and her regrowth was extremely impressive. We had to make that humane decision on that animal because the amount of internal tumors and external regrowth was pretty substantial. So it's really difficult to tell. In my perfect little world, I like to think everybody's happy and healthy and back off into the wild doing their normal turtle life things. But it's difficult. Kat, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to throw out there the satellite tagging is another tagging method that researchers often use. Devin mentioned that green turtles are kind of the divas of the sea, and they scrape their carapace to keep it free of epibiota. That also means that satellite transmitters, when glued to the back of a turtle on its carapace, do not stay very long. Before I worked in the hospital, we had tagged a green turtle and got 43 days of satellite time, which, if you can equate that to money, that's sort of like throwing an iMac computer into the ocean and never seeing it again. So some tagging projects that are asking particular habitat usage questions, research questions, will get 2 years of data on their animal. So there's not enough fine scale info we can get by putting a satellite tag on one of these youngsters for the amount of time that the tag will actually stick. So if that's the type of tracking, in addition to the pit tag and the flipper tag, that right now we don't have a satellite tracking project. That's the only other thing.
Thank you. Our next question is from Amanda that says, do you have an estimate of the percentage of the Florida sea turtle population that is affected by FP? Are there distinct geographic zones impacted?
Definitely. I'll jump on that one. So the way we can tell, and there are some in-water, there are some researchers that study the in-water life of sea turtles, and there are some kind of hot spots for FP around the state. And there was a study, early 2000s, I think, that had said in the Indian River Lagoon, from a project that was done, mark and recapture type study, that they had about 90-something% of the turtles they encountered in the IRL were impacted with FP. I believe also in the Big Bend area of the state, there's also a project that did a survey, and they were seeing like 50% of the turtles, I almost said students, 50% of the turtles had tumors there. Now that's not a comprehensive, we catch everybody or they observe everybody, but it was enough that it was a research project that was permitted, funded, and publication, peer review journal, so that, but no, do we know what the percentage is around the whole state? But there are definitely hot zones of FP. Some of the things that we hope to look at is in addition to the UV is water quality. There are areas that there's not a huge amount of flushing, tidal flushing, that have a significantly high level of FP turtles. So one would want to look at water quality and elements in that waterway to maybe point research towards. So yes, good question.
All right, and let's wrap up with one final question. How do the tumors affect the buoyancy? Does the type or location of the tumors have an effect on the turtle's buoyancy at all?
I'm happy, Devin, either one of us can do that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, it's they're thick, they're not hollow, they're not adding air to the body. They're cells, they're dense. It's an overproliferation of their own skin cells. The buoyancy issues that we see are really directly related to there being extra gas or air in their carapace, or in their GI, or if there's somehow within their body cavity, there was a boat injury or propeller that kind of went through the bone and introduced air to the body cavity. But it definitely inhibits the streamlined hydrodynamic ability of swimming ability, maneuvering of the animal. And also when the tumors are quite big and prolific, they'll get tangled on stuff. So having someone tangled in a cast net or tangled them on a filament, those are really kind of the issues that we see with relation to those tumors and kind of getting stuck at the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong trash.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Devin, for sharing your turtle wisdom with us, sharing your expertise. What an incredible experience to get a tour of the UF Whitney Sea Turtle Hospital.
Thanks for coming.
We really appreciate your time. And we are so thankful for you to be with us right now. Teachers, just to let you know, sorry for going a little bit over, but again, what a cool experience. I feel like we had to go over. You are officially now on lunch break. We will resume at about 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, you'll go to your scientist lab collaboration room, as always. At about 3 o'clock, we're asking both you and the scientist to fill out a survey, just evaluating the partnership of your time with the scientist, what it's like. It'll give us feedback. So next year when we do something like this, it'll help guide us in terms of the logistics, how we should do it the same, differently, things like that. But besides that, I hope you have an amazing lunch and an amazing rest of the day.